This poignant and chilling story unfolded during the summer heat of 2021. A young man decided to invite his beloved to the cinema to spend time together, but events took an entirely unexpected turn. The horror they experienced transferred from the screen directly into the auditorium. No one could have imagined that such a thing could happen. Riley Goodrich, a girl from the town of Corona, California, had been passionate about L-ball since her youth and was a member of the cheerleading team. Her sociable nature and kind-heartedness attracted people to her. After graduating from high school, Riley earned a scholarship to Grand Canyon University in Arizona and moved to live on their campus. However, the girl tried to visit her family in Corona as often as possible, as she was very attached to them. In the summer of 2021, after completing her first year of university, 18-year-old Riley returned to her hometown to enjoy the summer holidays and have a good rest. On Independence Day, July 4th, Riley's friends threw a party. It was at this celebration that the girl met a handsome young man named Anthony Borahas. Anthony was a year older than Riley, and the young people immediately felt a mutual attraction. They exchanged contacts and began communicating actively. Anthony Borahas was a successful student, the captain of the football team, and a true star. He participated in theatrical productions and had a wonderful voice. In 2019, Anthony actively developed his TikTok account, filming short videos, singing, and coming up with funny sketches. His channel quickly gained popularity, and the guy himself was surprised that the short videos attracted such a large audience. By the summer of 2021, Anthony's TikTok account had almost 1 million subscribers. At the same time, Anthony was developing his Instagram profile. He was undecided about what to do next: continue developing social networks and engage in blogging, or acquire a profession and find another way to earn money. Anthony and Riley communicated a lot online, and, by the way, Riley also had a quite popular Instagram account with about 300,000 followers. The couple constantly exchanged messages, and soon they arranged a date. Although Riley was already 18, it was important for her that her father, Dave, approved of her choice. She invited Anthony to her home and introduced him to her family. At first, Dave was wary of his daughter's chosen one, as a career on TikTok seemed unreliable to him. However, during a personal meeting, Anthony managed to dispel his doubts. The young man's sincerity, good manners, and friendliness made a pleasant impression on Riley's father, and he eventually gave his consent to their relationship. Shortly after meeting Riley's parents, Anthony went on vacation. The entire Borahas family went to the Hawaiian Islands to spend a little over a week at a hotel on the ocean shore. After the vacation, a tanned and energized Anthony returned home and immediately invited Riley on their first date. On Monday, July 26th, Anthony suggested that Riley go to the movies. They chose the evening screening of the film, The Forever Purge, together, a brutal thriller that depicts 12 hours of absolute lawlessness in America. According to the plot, a group of marauders decides that the annual purge should not end with the dawn but should last forever. Who could have thought that the choice of this particular film would become such an ominous coincidence for Anthony and Riley? Riley thoroughly prepared for the date, putting on her best outfit and styling her hair in wavy curls. Before the movie, the couple had dinner in a cozy restaurant that Riley often visited with her friends. The film started at 9:30 p.m. and was supposed to end around midnight. The weekday evening and the gloomy plot of the movie explained the almost empty auditorium. During the screening, Riley sent her mom a message: "The movie is not very interesting, but I'm next to Anthony, and I feel really good." These words became the last ones that the Goodrich family received from the girl. After that, the connection with her was lost forever. No one could have imagined that instead of a romantic end to the date, the couple would face a real-life purge. When the movie ended, the cleaner looked into the auditorium, expecting to see empty seats. In the semi-darkness, he discerned two motionless figures, a young couple who seemed to have fallen asleep after the film. As he approached, the cleaner saw a horrifying scene. The boy and girl were sitting unconscious in their seats. It was Anthony and Riley. Both had gunshot wounds to the head. The seats and floor were covered in blood. The cinema staff called 911. The police and ambulance arrived at the scene immediately. Unfortunately, Riley was already dead. Anthony had a barely palpable weak pulse. He was struggling to breathe, balancing on the brink of life and death. The young man was urgently taken to the hospital and connected to life support machines. Meanwhile, the police carefully examined the crime scene. The auditorium held an ominous secret. Despite the obvious traces of gunshots, no weapon or signs of a struggle were found. There were also no surveillance cameras in the hall. The only thing that could be established was that both Anthony and Riley were shot at point-blank range from behind. But who did it? And the main question, why? The news of the brutal crime at the cinema quickly spread throughout California and then across America. In the first hours, a shocking version leaked to the media. Allegedly, Anthony had shot the girl and then himself. But the investigators immediately rejected this assumption. The weapon used to commit the crime was not found. The angle of the bullet entry holes also contradicted this version. Riley's family was informed of the terrible news. Her mother, who had received a carefree message from her daughter just an hour earlier, now froze, clutching the phone in her hand. How could an ordinary visit to the cinema turn into such a nightmare? The police had no answer to this question. They were perplexed, trying to understand what had really happened in that auditorium. Meanwhile, medics were desperately fighting for Anthony's life. The prognosis was bleak. The bullet had caused catastrophic damage to his health. The young man was in a coma, being the only witness to the crime, but he could not tell anything. During the questioning of the cinema employees, an important detail emerged. Only 6 tickets were sold for that fatal screening. This meant that the killer was most likely among those 4 other viewers. But one fact puzzled both the police and all of America, which was closely following the investigation. How could it be that no one heard the shots? The first assumption seemed absurd but not devoid of logic. Perhaps the sounds of gunfire on the screen drowned out the real shots. The killer could have fired at the very moment when a loud shootout was happening in the movie, and the viewers expected to hear the sounds of gunshots. The investigation moved from a dead end when the detectives checked the information about the ticket purchase. It turned out that 4 tickets were bought by one person. He purchased them for himself and his 3 companions. This led the police to think that the crime could have been committed by a group of individuals. The investigation was in full swing, and within a day, law enforcement announced the detention of the main suspect, 20-year-old Joseph Jimenez. The perpetrator was betrayed by his own recklessness. The day after the murder, around 9:30 p.m., Joseph himself called 911. He was hysterically shouting into the phone that an armed man was chasing him. When the patrol arrived at the scene, they were in for a surprise. A frightened Joseph was waving a gun, which immediately aroused suspicion. The caliber of the weapon matched the casings found at the crime scene. Ballistic examination confirmed that the 2 spent cartridges from the cinema were fired from that very pistol. Joseph Jimenez was arrested on suspicion of murdering Riley Goodrich and attempting to kill Anthony Borahas. Detectives thoroughly searched the trailer where the suspect lived. There they found Riley's wallet. Despite persistent denials of his guilt, the facts testified against Jimenez. The police quickly identified the 3 other visitors to that tragic screening and interrogated them to reconstruct the full picture of the crime. It turned out that they were all friends of Joseph, and their testimonies shocked even seasoned investigators. According to the companions, they were sitting together and just watching the movie, but during the screening, they noticed something unusual. Joseph began to behave strangely. He was talking to himself and muttering something incomprehensible. At one point, he said he needed to go to the restroom and left the auditorium. But instead of going to the toilet, he headed to his car parked near the cinema. He took a backpack from the car, which contained a gun. Joseph returned to the auditorium, sat down in his seat, and continued watching the movie with everyone else. Shortly after, he confessed to his friends that he had brought a weapon with him. They were extremely surprised and alarmed. The film was ongoing, with Anthony and Riley sitting in front. Joseph started mumbling something indistinctly under his breath again. One of his companions only heard the phrase, "I can't do this to them." The friends told Joseph that they needed to go to the restroom. Frightened by his behavior, all three left the auditorium and went out of the cinema. There were many odd moments in the friends' stories that raised doubts. The most questions arose about their escape from the cinema. Why didn't they try to find out why Joseph had brought a gun? Didn't they think that he could use the weapon against other viewers? Moreover, the guys did not report the incident to either the cinema staff or the police. Joseph's behavior unequivocally indicated that he was up to something bad. But the friends decided to simply ignore the situation. At the same time, they admitted that as soon as they heard the news about the shooting at the cinema, they immediately suspected Joseph. Despite all the efforts of the doctors, on July 31st, Anthony Borahas died in the hospital. He fought for his life in intensive care for 5 days, but in the end, his heart stopped. While the investigation was ongoing, the city mourned the victims of this brutal crime. Hundreds of people with burning candles gathered in the square near the cinema, which had turned from a dating spot into a symbol of tragedy. It was then revealed that long before the fatal evening, Anthony had signed documents consenting to organ donation in case of his death. The young man could hardly have imagined that this would happen so soon. The prosecutors, while forming the charges, had no doubts. With such an evidence base, the results of ballistic examination, the stolen wallet, and the testimonies of eyewitnesses, Joseph was facing the death penalty. Apparently realizing this, the suspect decided to confess to the crime. But his story raised even more questions. Joseph reported that 9 months before the crime, a psychiatrist had diagnosed him with schizophrenia. The doctor prescribed medications, but shortly before the incident, Jimenez stopped taking the pills, and then voices began to sound in his head. At first, they said they wanted to steal his car and television. Then the situation worsened. Joseph recalled that his mother had died a year ago. The voices began to threaten that they would take the rest of his family. That evening at the cinema, he heard the voices again, as if they were coming from the seats in front where Anthony and Riley were sitting. They ordered him to kill the couple. If he refused, the voices promised to kill his father, sister, and brother. According to Joseph, he tried to fight it, but eventually gave in and committed the crime. When his friends left the auditorium, he stood up, approached the couple from behind, and started shooting. The bullets hit Anthony first, then Riley. After that, Joseph put the gun back in his backpack, left the cinema, got into his car, and drove away. In his testimony, Jimenez described in detail how terrified he felt during the shooting and in the following hours, as well as how he was worried about his future. He claimed that the voices in his head were tormenting him, and he could not distinguish right from wrong. At that moment in the cinema, Joseph was convinced that he was simply protecting his family and had no other choice. But could the suspect have made up this story about the voices? Undoubtedly, yes. Moreover, only truly serious mental disorders could have saved him from the death sentence in this case. So this was his only chance to avoid such a fate. However, the theft of Riley's wallet did not fit into Joseph's story that after the shots, he fled the crime scene in a panic. Who would think of stealing a wallet in a state of shock and horror? Nevertheless, there were oddities in Jimenez's behavior that made the investigators doubt his sanity. What killer, having committed a brutal double murder, would call the police the next day with nonsense about being pursued? And his friends told about alarming signs, incomprehensible mumbling, strange looks, inadequate actions. Perhaps these were indeed manifestations of a mental disorder. But if we assume that Joseph acted consciously, the situation looked even more absurd. Why did he steal only the wallet and not the phone or other valuables? Why did he call the cops the next day when he could have simply disappeared? Moreover, Jimenez had not previously been held liable, even for minor offenses. It is hard to believe that a person without a criminal past suddenly decided on a double murder for the sake of a wallet. At the end of September 2021, the first court hearing in the case took place. Joseph declared his innocence, referring to mental health problems. He did not deny his involvement in the crime, but the court had to consider the issue of his sanity. The suspect agreed to plead guilty only if he was found insane. Several years passed before the judge announced the verdict, guilty. The court psychiatrist concluded that Joseph Jimenez was sane at the time of the crime. In February 2024, he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the right to parole. It is also known that the public and the media accused the cinema administration of not checking Joseph at the entrance to the auditorium and allowing him to bring a gun inside. But are these accusations fair? In the USA, cinema employees usually only check visitors' backpacks and bags to prevent food from entering the auditorium. If someone brings a weapon, hiding it under their clothes, no one will know about it. The only way out in such a situation is to install metal detectors in every establishment. Perhaps, over time, this security measure will become mandatory. I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Until next time, friends.